So let's imagine if you drive a car. Let's imagine you're somewhere where you haven't been before, in an area where you're unfamiliar, and you want to find a parking spot. Nowadays, where you think, where would you go to get that information? You probably don't know one whatever app or whatever it is that you could use everywhere. And I think this is exactly the opportunity that we have as Parkling, that we solve this problem to help you find an on-street parking spot. And this is why we founded Parkling at the end of 2016. And it is an unsolved problem. We find that there's a lot of latent demand when we talk to people. And it is something where you have a huge value creation potential. We are actually focusing on markets in Europe and in the US, where you actually do have a lot of on-street parking. Asia is a little bit a different story. And if you just look at the number of parking events with pain or with stress, there's a huge value creation potential to basically help consumers solve that problem. And there's also other metrics you can look at. For example, there's lots of research indicating that about 30% of all traffic in cities is parking search traffic. So big value creation opportunity, unsolved problem, a really good place to start a business. Now, the way we position ourselves, of course, there's a consumer somewhere, and what's currently happening, there's really an intense fight going on between different large players to have control or access to that consumer and to provide services to that consumer. On one hand, you have the big mapping and navigation providers such as Google Maps. You have the OEMs who would like to keep the consumer basically in the navigation system in the car. And you also now have all these payment apps, parking payment apps such as Park Now and so on, that also would like to have access to this consumer. And we position ourselves as a B2B provider. So we provide the high quality data to the automotive industry for this service. And we also have an app, the Parkling app, and you can download it in the app stores. We're not a B2C company, we're not an app company, but for the lucky ones who are here in Berlin today, we actually do have free access to our data in that app. We don't show everything we have, but for Berlin, we do show it. So if you really are looking for a parking spot, you're not from here, you want to get some help, take a look at it, and you'll find that information. Now, of course, the interesting question is how do we do that? That's always the next question I'm getting. And I don't think you have to read the details, but let me point out to you three things. On the left, one thing we're doing is we're basically scanning all the streets, and it looks a little bit like Google Street View. So we're basically filming the streets, doing this in a way that it's conform with policy. And then we have scanners that we put on fleets. And fleets could be cabs, it could be Uber drivers, it could be bigger fleets. Those circle all the time, and they give us the basically live data and information to understand where are parking spots available. Now, all this stuff goes into our forecasting engine, so we use that data to make forecasts. So you can think about this as almost like a weather forecast for parking, where we have live probes on the street that actually look at the specific situation. We show this data, for example, in an app as a heat map, or there are other ways to show this. And this is the way this works. Now, why this approach? There are all kinds of things you can think about. When I talk to people, they ask me, why don't we use satellites? Why don't we use sensors in the ground? And so on. There's two criteria we have to meet. One is the thing has to work globally. When you talk to the automotive industry, they are not interested in like really high quality data in Hamburg Hafen City. They want to have a global solution. And the second one, the data has to be really good. Because if it's not really good, the user is not going to use it. And when you think about satellite data, for example, it sounds scalable, but you never come to the quality level that you need. So scalability, quality, and this is what we achieve with this approach. And the third one is it's actually cost efficient. So it really works, and there's a business model behind it. And now finally, this is just some data we took in Berlin. This is actually the time needed to find a parking spot. And we've done tests where we give people, basically people that are not familiar with the area, and we let them drive, in these places, for example, Hackescher Markt, where it's hard to find a spot. And we let them drive without our support, and we let them drive with our app. And you can obviously see the reduction, the time reduction you need in order to find a spot is significantly reduced. And what's most important, actually, is that the stress is reduced. Yeah, because people get really stressed when they're somewhere where they're not familiar and they want to find a parking spot. And you can imagine you're using our solution, you don't know where to go, you don't know where you're allowed to park, and we're basically telling you go straight, go right, go left, and this is the path that will maximize your probability to find a spot. I just, towards the end, often get the question, but I want to know exactly where the spot is. Even if we knew this, and sometimes we do, we wouldn't tell you. Because if you have a parking pressure situation and there's one spot available, and I show you that spot, by the time you get there, it's usually going to be free for less than a minute, your experience will be frustration and not success. So we don't want to show you individual free spots. We want to show you the probability where you find a spot, where is it most likely that you have success. Okay, so I'm at the end of this presentation. Thanks for your attention. If there's anybody in the room who either is interested to purchase this kind of data, anybody from the automotive industry, if there's anybody in the room who has a fleet, is operating a fleet where we could attach our sensors, please come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.